Welcome to World Cup Sera Qatar, a podcast produced and presented by sports journalism students live from our TV studios in Preston. I'm Jack Goodwin.
And I'm Alex McMonnies. Well, there's no football for 2 days, but we thought we'd bring you a very special edition of the podcast because we are joined by the legendary commentator Barry Davies. Tennis, badminton, ice hockey, ice skating, gymnastics, cycling, beach volleyball, athletics, and of course, football. He's commentated on not one, but 9 World Cup tournaments, including one final. So, welcome, Barry.
Thank you. Missed out tennis.
We did miss out tennis. That's, we'll have to take that up with our scriptwriter there. But how have you been doing?
I've been doing all right, actually. I'm watching quite a lot of the World Cup. I was in America when it started and saw bits there. They covered it in detail. Even matches between 2 foreign countries, but obviously with a mind to give as much coverage as possible for the United States. And as England were in that group, it helped. But they showed the other matches as well.
And have you been enjoying it? What's been like your highlights of the tournament so far?
Ooh, I think possibly watching, taking England out of it for a moment. Probably watching Brazil the other day. That was a bit like the old Brazil. It was as though they were pushed there by the most famous Brazilian footballer ever, in Pelé. And I'm glad to say he seems to be getting a little bit better than was the case a couple of days ago.
Yeah, and they seem to be going, especially against South Korea in the last 16. They seem to kind of be the favourites, as we enter the quarter-final stage now. Would they be your favourites to kind of go all the way and win it?
Apart from England, I think England have as good a chance as anyone, actually. And I don't think the Brazilians, if it happens to be against them in the final, would think that they were going to win with any comfort. So no, I'm still have my faith in Gareth Southgate's team, and I think there are one or two sides. I mean, the match between Holland and Argentina is going to be very interesting, and it's a rehash of 1998 with a wonderful goal by Bergkamp that won it for Holland in the closing seconds or minutes, perhaps. Lots of memories of the World Cup for me, and I did 10, so including the last one in South Korea and Japan.
And with all those memories, I imagine there must be a pretty large part of you that wishes you were there commentating on it almost.
Yes, some of them. I think I would be probably getting myself into a bit of trouble by being critical about the acting that's going on, which is driving me bonkers. I mean, the expression of absolute major injury comes on the face when they've just been tapped on the ankle, and I think it's ridiculous. Also, the early stages of the World Cup, I didn't like all this passing back, and it's almost as though they want to get the crowd going by passing it right in front of the goalkeeper, being a bit late. And a couple of them have been badly caught, but apart from that, I've enjoyed a lot of matches.
Yeah, and we've kind of been interested to ask you this question beforehand because obviously there's all sorts of commentators and broadcasters there in Qatar at the moment, and how they get their research, how the producers get their research. A lot of it's done via the internet now. Obviously, yes. Barry, was it your first World Cup you commentated on was in 1966? How did you actually go and research players who were, part of the foreign teams and in foreign leagues?
Well, I managed in my group up in the northeast of England, which included North Korea, who produced the shock of the entire World Cup when they beat Italy. And I watched them. And I reckoned that by the end, I knew how they were going to play, and I knew 21 of the 22 players. And I worked off photographs, and I was absolutely sure that I knew all those, but I just couldn't get this 22nd guy. And I found out later that the reason was that the photograph I had, he had long hair. And just before he left Korea, he was given a crew cut. So he looked entirely different.
And of course, like you say, 10 World Cups you've done. Which one stands out as your favourite that you commentated on?
74, because of doing a lot of up and down on the autobahns of Germany and seeing a lot of teams, in particular the Dutch side, who ought to have won it, but didn't. Germany came through, not this time though. It's, I don't know, I'm not sure I can add too much to that. The obvious, I suppose, the Maradona is the best goal I've ever seen, the second goal, not the first, obviously. And, you know, I had very good memories from most of the cup finals because it's just a lovely thing to be on. And the one in Italy then was one of my favourites because Italy appreciates football. And I don't know what they're going through their football supporters now, knowing that they haven't got a team there. It's really quite strange without them.
You kind of just touched on it there, you know, how that goal from Diego Maradona, which you kind of described as pure footballing genius back in 1986. Just talk us a bit through that game. Could you tell with the first goal that it was a handball at first?
I wish I could answer yes to that. But no, I didn't. I'm high up in the Azteca Stadium, like the other commentators. I don't know how many managed to see it immediately. But the replays were being played in London. And I had somebody telling me that Shilton's going up for it now, Maradona's going. And they made very clear that I could mention to the viewer what had happened. But I made a big mistake by saying that it might have been offside, which was absolute nonsense as the ball came off an England defender. So I was not feeling that great at that moment. And of course, within 5 minutes came what's considered to be the greatest goal ever scored in World Cup finals.
So yeah, you say you weren't feeling great there, but of course I know that one of the proudest moments in your career was when you got your first ever FA Cup final in 1995. And as an Evertonian myself, I wasn't alive at the time, but it's still kind of a big day for me and my family as well. So yeah, just talk us through that, your first ever FA Cup final in 1995, and a 1-0 win for Everton, might I say.
Well, I had to wait a little bit, it's true. To be honest, I rather prepared for that final. Usually I've gone in pretty relaxed to these things, but I thought I want to get things right. I want Abide With Me to have total silence and to be a gap before I picked up the commentary. Little things like that which annoyed me when I look back on it. As to the actual match, it wasn't a great match, but your man took his goal pretty well. And it was a good job there was a goal in the match. But it wasn't a great game, but it was a much better game than the one the following year between Liverpool and was it Liverpool and Manchester United? I can even forget now.
Eric Cantona's winner, yeah.
Yes. And that was the only good thing in the match, actually. It was a poor final. And I had a press man from Liverpool who rang me the next day saying, you know, what was it just that the technique and the tactics of the two sides just wiped each other out? And I said, no, nobody played in the way that they can, except for Cantona when he scored the goal. And he said to me, yeah, that's just what the Liverpool manager said to me.
And Barry, if you could have covered one match that you never actually got the chance to go to, which one do you think it would be?
A better World Cup final than the one I eventually had, which was extremely dull. funny, I seem to be picking out little dull matches, but that was a great shame. I mean, basically, it was the fault of none of the players. But the heat was worse than it is now in Qatar in that final. And they played in one of the sunnier parts of United States. And it was very, very warm that day. We were drinking bottles of water at a risk of wanting to disappear for a few minutes during the course of the match.
And of course, one of the hardest games you must have ever had to cover was the 1985 European Cup final, where, of course, before the match, obviously the unfortunate Heysel incident. It must have been a crazy thing for you to have to do. So just talk us through like how that was, having to kind of describe what you were seeing at the time, and yeah, just what you were seeing really.
Well, I went to watch a football match, and I was left to describe a disaster, and it was very difficult, I have to say. Jimmy Hill handed over to John Motson, which of course I ignored. I didn't think that correcting him was appropriate in this circumstance. I didn't want to I would normally, if there hadn't been a problem, I'd have made a joke over that. But I mean, it was a total disaster. There were people totally in the wrong. They weren't all people from Liverpool by any manner of means. But I just said what came to my mind. When Jimmy Hill did hand to me at the beginning, the previous 10 or 15 minutes, I've been scribbling notes, trying to think what I would say. And down by my feet was a mass of paper that I just screwed up. That's not good enough. That's not right. And then I opened my mouth and hoped that I was saying the right things, which has been my attitude actually in doing football. I prepare for it, but I don't prepare any lines. I just say what I think should be said and hope that my foot is sufficiently far away from my mouth. But it was an absolute disaster. And of course, unfortunately, that I made what I thought was a good point by saying that it was a relief that supporters at the trouble end were able to get down and onto the pitch for safety. And just a couple of years later, we have the Heysel disaster, which was made worse by the fact that the government had decided that there should be fences around the ground to keep the hooligans out. They had no idea of the contribution that decision made and how many people died, and they're finally getting some proper attitude towards what happened that day. It wasn't only the total enthusiasm of the supporters at the start of it, but the fact that they were penned in was partly responsible.
And what was it like being involved in football during the 1980s when, like you said, kind of the English supporters were under scrutiny and there were, the English sides were banned from Europe, and they kind of went into that 1990 World Cup into Italy, and there was a lot of, fear around how the English were going to deal with that.
Yeah. And the most embarrassing thing is when going to European matches, because all the European commentators would take the mickey out of us. Here come the troublemakers or whatever. I mean, as a sort of probably not a very friendly joke at times. You went expecting but hoping that you were going to be able to talk about football and not about, nutcases. I think it was a fairly common word, but they were, absolutely.
Yeah, you speak very strongly there about something that Yeah, a really serious issue, of course. But just moving away from football for a bit. Obviously, you commentated on other sports as well. Like I say, we listed a whole host of them at the start, and I somehow still managed to miss one out. But which one of those did you most enjoy?
I think probably working at Wimbledon. It's a lovely fortnight, and I miss that a lot. Uh, but I wanted to get my retirement in before somebody at the BBC said you're too old. I did manage to match Dan Maskell, not in his knowledge of tennis. I don't know whether you're probably too young to remember him, but he was just the best tennis commentator around. Didn't say very much, but what he said was appropriate and often quite inspiring. And he managed to commentate at Wimbledon at the age of 80, and so did I.
So you pick tennis as your favourite there, but where does I hope you remember this, or I'm going to sound like a complete nutcase. But where does commentating on the World Stare Out Championships rank?
You'd be amazed how many people tell me about that. It was just amazing. Fortunately, I was working with a very, very good comedian, and when I was first asked to do it, I had no idea what they were talking about. They persuaded me to go down to the studio to look to see what I might have to talk about, and I thought, what the heck do we say? And anyway, they forced me to try a little bit, and then we left it. And I thought, well, that's the end of that. I was possibly quite relieved. And then the phone went when just before I got home, and my wife said to me, "They want you to do it." I said, "What?" I said, "They want you to do it. They've telephoned saying, will I tell you when you get back home?" And it was just an enormous amount of fun. And what we did was to do it ad lib, and then there was a bit of a script that was worked in, and when they edited it, they used both. But I remember the stripper going across and the reaction after that. It was very funny, very, very testing, but very enjoyable.
Barry, there's obviously quite a stark contrast when you're commentating for TV audiences and radio. How do you kind of change how you do it? Like how were you taught to use description to complement the pictures that the viewers saw on screen, and how is that different for when you're broadcasting on radio?
Well, for a start, I never broadcast on radio until very, very late in my career, just to help out one of the other companies. So I didn't have the problem that radio commentators do have when they come to television. All of them, however good they are prepared to admit that. But I just, I didn't prepare things. I prepared the notes that I would have to have in terms of 25th cap and so on and so forth, but didn't feel that when the goal was scored, that was the first statistic that should go in. And I don't know. I just developed a style with time. Some of the early commentaries I did after that '66 World Cup, when I was given a contract by John Bromley and worked up in the north for basically the Granada setup. I look back on them with horror, but people say, "Oh, I loved what you said on that," and so on and so forth. And said, "Oh, I would love to do that line of commentary again because I would do it differently." I'm sure, which out of experience. But it is a question of adding to the picture. I mean, every commentator has to shout goal or something like that just to make sure that the viewer has actually seen that it went the right side of the netting and so on and so forth. I didn't, if I over prepared, which previously said I did in the cup final, it was bad news. And I was often, when I went into a match thinking, I haven't done enough preparation for this, that I had one of my better days. And that was simply because of what I'd seen and the words that I found. I mean, the Franny goal that people talk about for Derby against Manchester City. I mean, you know, I could never have thought of saying what I said, except that when I saw his face after he'd scored the goal, and I referred to the fact that it was like I said, just look at his face, because he was a school kid back all of a sudden, knowing that he just achieved something that was wonderful for him. It was against his old team, left under a bit of a cloud. And here he was, in fact, launching Derby's challenge for a championship, which they won.
And of course, the team you would never have had to do too much research on would, of course, been Tottenham, as a massive Spurs fan. And did you ever have to hide your emotions at times in the press box for big matches when you were commentating on Tottenham?
No, I think I probably was rather hard on Tottenham for that reason. Not many people knew during my career that I was a Spurs supporter as a kid. I only know now because I went up to it in the book that I wrote with the help of my family.
And Barry, just moving on from that and kind of talking about, you know, people that you've interviewed in time or people you've worked with, who have been kind of the best kind of interviewees you've had, or on the other hand, who have been like the most difficult to have?
I would have thought that Alf Ramsey would have taken a lot of bit. I interviewed him 2 or 3 times. It was just that Alf, for most of his career, felt that you had to have won a few caps to be in the position that I was in, or any other commentator was in. And I only during the course of his career, the only time we really sat down and had a chat together was after England had gone out of the Mexico tournament, and he was around the studios. I don't know why, doing something for somebody else, but perhaps looking very lost. And I said, Alf, can I buy you a drink or a cup of tea or whatever? And he said, cup of tea. And we talked about football for about 40 minutes. And there was no suggestion from him that, you know, what righted you to say that, which was one of his lines. The best people to interview, there are too many of those. I'm not sure I could pick one, but it's maybe golly, his name's gone out of my head. Who was the chap who finally won Wimbledon? Oh, goodness, not obviously not Pete Sampras, but do you know anything about tennis? Are you into tennis? I can't think
Bruce Becker.
Boris Becker.
Boris Becker, sorry. Boris Becker.
No, not Boris Becker. No, though I did quite a few pieces of Boris Becker. So,
Jimmy Connors?
Sorry? No, he married the German tennis player. They've got Steffi Graf. He married Steffi Graf. Oh. Anyway, because I did the interview with him when he won Wimbledon. And in those days, I don't know if they still do it, somebody from the Wimbledon staff. Sorry? Agassi, Andre Agassi. And the chap who went round to the various interviews with Agassi said to me, or just announced, 3.5 minutes only. And the floor manager said to me, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "No, I was talking to our director." And we did an interview that was quite fun, and went on for about 6 minutes. and I apologized to him afterwards. I met him for the first time doing a story before Wimbledon 2 years back, and he obviously remembered me for some reason. And he said, no problem at all, not for you, no problem. And then as I went out of the studio and somebody else came in, he said to the guy from the Wimbledon staff, got down on, he listed about 4 stations that lost a minute of their timing of the interview. I don't know whether they did what I did, but that was a fun interview. I enjoyed that.
Now, Barry, we can't really have you here without discussing the rivalry, in inverted commas, with John Motson. He once described your commentary as restrained compared to his more excitable style. And, you know, it's been talked about so much, but was there any genuine animosity or resentment there, or was it just, you know, a typical working relationship, two people at the top of their profession?
I think the press made a lot of it. The BBC, in their way, made a lot of it, because they would say that before the World Cup, for example, no, we haven't decided who's number one, and so on and so forth. When they had, and through various sources, I knew they had. And I thought they got a lot of publicity out of it. There was an off-the-screen story as well. But he and I got on perfectly well. In fact, I was having a drink with him on Monday at a get-together of some of the old lags of the BBC, and then a very amusing speech by Steve Ryder. He's a very funny man when he wants to be.
And kind of...
John and I mean, we went to a game at Watford, which I organised. I organised that we should get together. And he organised the Watford side of it, and they made us very well. And the cutaway shot was on Match of the Day, because I thought people would realise that actually we weren't trying to knock each other's chins or eyes out or whatever. We got on well enough, but he did have too many matches, and I didn't have enough.
Just touching on the modern day era of commentating, obviously a couple of years ago, a lot of broadcasters and commentators faced a big issue as they had to commentate from home due to the pandemic. And I know a lot of local radio stations were kind of commentating via the iFollow link. How difficult do you think this will have been for them?
It's a very difficult thing to do. I've done a few over the years. One in particular, when I drew attention to an injury and thought the guy was making a big fuss about it. And subsequently, 6 months or so later, I met him and he said, I've recovered from the operation now. I thought it was a minor ankle knock. And one should never do that, judging it off the screen. I believe a lot of companies are doing some of the World Cup matches off just looking at a monitor, which is very difficult for them.
And of course, Barry, we're obviously sports journalism students here, both in our final year at uni, so only just a few months away from entering the industry, as scary as that thought may be. But what sort of advice would you give to the next generation just about to start out in the industry?
I would say just one thing: be yourself. Listen to other people, and if you want to borrow something from them or learn something from them, so well and good. But in the end, I mean, I was told by a chap called Sam Leach, who was our boss way before your time. David Coleman, have you heard of David Coleman?
Yeah.
Yes, you've heard of David Coleman. If you're, I mean, he set a lot of standards. And Sam, who was the boss, said to me, I want you to watch and listen to David Coleman. Do everything that David Coleman does, because he knows what he's doing and he's the best. And he was, at the time, particularly in track and field, athletics, which I did stand in for him 3 or 4 times in that sport too. But it's just that you need to do it your way, not in an arrogant fashion. And I said to Sam, I will listen to everything that he does, and I'll listen to every commentator because I want to learn. But in the final analysis, I would rather fail as Barry Davies than be considered a lesser copy of David Coleman. So be yourself. Do it your way.
Thank you, Barry. We can't help but notice as well, just behind you on the screen, there seems to be quite a lot of newspaper cuttings. Are they from your career, and what are some of your highlights from there?
Yeah, when the people who decided they would write something about me or whatever, and we found a place in America near Tampa that did these things to put them onto a solid backing, and it was decided that they should go up on the wall in my study from where I'm talking to you. A lot of nice things. I didn't have too many bashes on the head, and I still have nice letters from people. And I still talk to people in the street who stop me and say, "You remember so and so and so and so." Sometimes I have to con them a bit that I do remember it, because there were a lot of things, a lot of commentaries, a lot of good moments. And as Her Majesty actually helped me on my way, because I could have been a doctor or a dentist, but I missed out on exams at the wrong time, and I had to do a thing called national service. And also, it was at the time when Khrushchev and Kennedy were having an argument with each other and their countries. And as a result of that, I was in the army for 2.5 years. I managed to get a commission. And I was asked to do some broadcasting for British Forces Broadcasting. And that's where I started. But for that, I would never have done it. And when I met Her Majesty as an official thing, talking to her, she said, "I gather you've been doing this job for a very long time." And I said, "Yes, Your Majesty, I have. And I've been paid for a hobby." And she said, "Oh, how lovely." And it has been. I miss it, of course, but I got out at the right time.
And of course, being out of it, you'll have time to watch the England-France match on Saturday. So, what are your predictions for that? Are you looking forward to it?
I think it'll be a very good game, and I think both sides will go into it believing they can win it, but knowing they could lose it. It should be probably one of the best matches of the championship. I'm pretty confident with England. I think they have more pace, and they played so well in the last match. I think he's done a good job, Southgate, and so have the players. And I think they are essentially a team. Been a few England teams over the years where A didn't like B too much, and C was prepared to get into the argument too. But this is a real team. They all work for each other. When the subs bench, you can see smiles. You don't see anybody looking a bit like Ronaldo did yesterday. When he was, in a way, I mean, he's probably fearing that Portugal can go on, and the one thing he hasn't been able to do to win the World Cup, and he's not going to be able to help them do that. But it worked very well what their manager did, because the youngster with his hat-trick.
Yeah, we certainly could do with a 6-1 victory on Saturday as well. Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us, Barry. We really, really appreciate you coming on and giving us 30 or 35 minutes of your time.
My pleasure, I'm going to show you. And good luck to you in your careers. I shall listen out for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So that's it for today. Thanks to our special guest, Barry Davies.
And yeah, that wraps up this episode of Sera Qatar. And thank you for joining us, and we will be back on Friday. Thanks.